tonight we're kind of returning to the theme of media, but it's not going to be about its use in terms of misinformation or persuading people, but really about the bravery of two people, a cameraman and a reporter, who were a team who ended up inside of the Congress on January 6, 2022, right? 21, right. So these are two people who saw from the inside, and we have a lot of questions for them, like, were you scared? Why would anyone want to be in that hallway at that particular time? And we also want to discuss the politics itself. In this room are quite a few people who have been involved in this. We are doing this with the journalism school, and we have Mark Hansen here, who he can raise his hand up, and we're thankful for his support and the support of the center, as well as the Alliance Center and other centers. It's supported by many groups across the university, and this will be used to be transmitted later and available to the public. So what is BAID? Well, the BAID, the part inside is AI, and tonight's is not about AI. We have other people here who have talked about this before, including Sandra Motz, who comes here pregnant with ideas and things to add and add. And she gave a great talk and discussion with us. We have other people who talk about the various topics, including choice. We have Oded Netzer, who wrote a brilliant new book, who's kind of the person who oversees these various projects. So we have assembled kind of the folks here who are important to this effort. But we wanted to achieve, by avoiding the AI part and thinking more about democracy, is really to look at what is, perhaps the outcome or maybe the cause of many of the things which are troubling us right now around the world. Because one of the puzzles we have is this, what you're going to describe tonight, is it only a US experience? Or is why, when we look around Europe or elsewhere, we see this happening in so many different countries, which makes you feel it's just not only the US itself, it's something which is larger. Maybe it's technology, maybe it has to do with the growing differences in income, the loss of faith in the future. And these are all big questions, which maybe we'll turn to this at the end. But right now we have really the luck to have you two guys who came kind of to the heart of this thing and saw it from the, I guess what's the expression, from the bowels of the beast, and will tell us a bit about that. So I think what we'll start off, maybe is turning it over to both of you, and maybe you can self-introduce a little bit in your past and tell folks what ITV is about, and then we'll look at this reel and talk further about it. But thanks so much for coming here tonight.
Not at all. Well, thanks for inviting us. I mean, let me introduce myself and then Mark will do it. So my name is Robert Moore. I'm a reporter for the British network, ITV News. It's kind of the competitor of the BBC. It's the main commercial broadcaster in the UK. Small company, but we have a good sort of international reputation. It's part of ITN, which is the sort of main news gathering force of commercial television in Britain. And I'm a correspondent here. I've been based here a long time, but I'm a sort of veteran foreign correspondent. So I've worked a lot in Moscow and in the Middle East, and a great deal in the last 15 years in Washington. And there's many places I expected to cover an insurrection, and it's fair to say that Washington was not one of them. So I came here because I was persuading my family that this was a nice, peaceful place to be, right? So after my days chasing kind of wars in the Middle East, I thought, well, let's go to Washington and have a nice, quiet life. And then came across January the 6th. But I'm talented. I'm lucky to be working with incredibly talented camera guys and videographers. And one of the great veterans of ITV News is a guy who cut his teeth in Belfast in the conflict and troubles of Northern Ireland. Mark.
Yeah, I said it would never happen on January 6th. Robert will be fine, don't worry about it. I described it as Bluster's last stand. Just couldn't have been more wrong, obviously. But that's why he does the words and I just point the camera. I grew up and filmed in Belfast and then moved Did a lot of stuff in the Middle East and various other places as peace broke out and ruined the living I was having in Belfast. And then moved to Asia, 10 years in Beijing, and then about 6 years here. So.
Right, so we've covered a lot of conflict. So one of the questions about January the 6th is how does that compare? And we can talk about that. But certainly, for somebody who's grown up in and reported and filmed in Belfast, nothing on January the 6th fazed Mark. And for me, it's fair to say January the 6th wasn't particularly high up in my in my experience of conflict zones. I've been in places which were much more dangerous, and we can.
More the location of it, wasn't it?
Right. So let's be clear. If you cover conflict for a living, January the 6th was not up there in terms of its violence, but it was up there in terms of its symbolism, and we can talk about why that is such an important part of the January the 6th narrative. It isn't that it happened, it's that it happened in Washington, that it happened in the capital of all places, this great bastion of the American experiment. So that is what gave it such power. And I think we're going to watch a few minutes only, because we haven't got much time, but a few minutes of our reporting that day. Please remember, when you watch this, it was done under ridiculous time pressure, because in Britain our flagship program goes out at 10 p.m. That's 5 p.m. Eastern time, so just a couple of hours after the capital was invaded, we had to turn around a TV report. So it was flawed, but it was the best we could do on the day.
This at about 3:30, I think.
Yeah, so we had an hour to edit this report, and so it's flawed. But in television news, as some of you will know, it is full of compromises, and that's true of filming, writing, scripting, and editing as well.
So now we got Robert Mora and Mark Davey, and I think we're ready to go with that. So.
But for Capitol Hill police officers, this was a losing battle. This is exactly what was feared, but in no way is this a surprise. It has been fueled by the president's rhetoric, and it's increasingly clear this election has not healed the wounds. It has simply amplified them. We followed the aggrieved and infuriated Trump supporters as they stormed the building.
Yeah, let's stop it there, because you get a flavour. So, we can talk about this in the question and answer, but for us, we were the only television crew kind of embedded with the mob, and therefore that went over the threshold with them. And for me as a reporter, it was like journalistic gold, because I could talk to people in real time as they were ransacking Congress. I could literally go up and ask them, look, why are you here? Why are you storming Congress? It was, we often do after a riot or something, we'll talk to people about why did this happen? Or why did you act like that? But this was, for me, kind of remarkable, because we could do it in real time. As they were doing it, we could ask them what their grievances were. So that was it. We can talk a little bit later about why it was that a British TV crew, not an American television crew, was accompanying the sort of baying mob that stormed Congress. Interesting question. I've got views on that, because it's about a huge failure, in my view, of American news gathering, and how much American television news is about discussion and panels, what we like to call the panelization of TV news, and how people no longer have the money, resources, or the will to send teams into the field, whereas ITN still does, like other European broadcasters. We can talk about that. But Mark, what are your thoughts on why was it that a British TV crew, a small British TV crew, was the only ones that were embedded in a mob that was, it was a story that was in the absolute heart of kind of the American networks, right? It's their real estate. So, where were the Americans?
Yes, our partner CNN ran your piece for 3 days afterwards on a loop, because they didn't have their own material. Every corner I turned in that place, I thought, what am I missing? Where's the crew that is getting the better stuff than us? Where's CNN, BBC, Sky, all of them? And they were absent. So we were slightly lucky in that they went through that opening and that weakness that they found, and we were lucky enough to be close enough to go with them. But there were still lots of other opportunities. There were 8 places were breached that day, and so I don't really understand why other camera crews were not close enough. I know of one US network, they were under strict safety instructions not to go in. I think if Fox News had gone in that day, they probably would have been torn apart because they declared for Arizona. So they betrayed their own, essentially. I think CNN would have struggled.
Right.
We
So
really distance ourselves
in
a
a
little
way, a European crew has an advantage in that, because people were asking us, the insurrectionists were asking us, who are you, where are you from, sizing us up. And we said, no, we don't have a dog in this fight. We want to hear your views. And in a bizarre way, they kind of almost saw us as, given that they felt that their views needed to be amplified and no one was listening to them, in a bizarre way, it was to kind of a European TV network that they thought, well, we'll let them, we'll kind of envelop them and let them follow us into the Capitol. But I think, another point to make about January the 6th and our experience is that, there are political dimensions to it. Why did it happen? What were the politics of it? Who should have been, who should be held accountable for it? There is a security side of the question of January the 6th. Why was a small number of people able to storm the Capitol when, surely we all knew that trouble was brewing? But there is this interesting journalistic question that we can perhaps address tonight, which is, why were other crews not anticipating that and able to provide sort of real-time journalism on that story? And there were a lot of people in studios, a lot of reporters were doing live shots outside of the Capitol, but didn't have the flexibility or maybe the ethos or the encouragement from their bosses to actually do news gathering on the front lines. And I think that, for me, is a crisis in American journalism, nothing less than that. I've got plenty of friends I admire who do it abroad, but I don't think there is anywhere near enough sort of news gathering on the front lines by American television journalists.
But we can also just ask the question differently and ask, why were you guys so crazy to go into those places? Because if no one else was there, one factor maybe is people didn't want to do it. Then you walked inside of Congress, and were you scared? Did you have a sense of danger? Or was this things you guys were
crazy? It was calculated, and we joke in our business about risk assessments because sometimes we're asked to fill them in on paper. But the truth is, every minute of every day in a job like that, you're doing a revision of your risk assessment. The only time I was scared was when we were kind of stuck in that space for about 20 minutes undercover, pepper spray. It was all very febrile. But no one was moving, and there were more people coming in, and I was worried about getting crushed. And Sophie, our producer who was with us, I got her to hold on to my jacket, and she held on to that as asked and instructed for 90 minutes to make sure. And a number of times she held me up, and I held her up. So that was risky. But in terms of being able to talk to the crowd and kind of calm them down and reassure them that we were not a threat to them, I think we felt able for that, didn't we?
Yeah, I think that's right. And I think, as Mark was saying, and we've done it on the streets of Belfast or in the, refugee camps of Gaza or wherever we do it, it's about risk calibration. And you see how great is the risk and how great is the reward. And it was, clear to us that the rewards were incredibly high on January the 6th because it was an extraordinarily dramatic and visual story, so it played incredibly well to sort of television news. It was obviously an important story because we were waiting for the certification of a presidential election in the United States. So the reward was so great that our risk assessment meant that we would go to extreme lengths. It felt like at worst we were going to get assaulted, but as we could see it, nobody had any sort of firearms on them. There were no kind of weapons other than a few baseball bats, and some guys had some flagpoles which we improvised spears. A couple of guys had stun guns, but nobody had sort of AR-15s alongside them. So we could make that risk that it was unlikely it was going to lead to a major firefight. And obviously, as we know, there were casualties on both sides. Ashley Babbitt was killed by a security agent, and obviously some police officers were badly hurt and arguably lost their lives in sort of mental health crises that followed it. So there were casualties that day. But it's more, in some ways, my view of January the 6th is it's two narratives have developed about this story. There is the kind of conservative narrative that this was, and a pro-Trump narrative that this was, a cri de coeur. This was basically angry people trying to make their voices heard, and it's overstated as a kind of insurrection. There's the Liberal and the January the 6th committee narrative. This was a major insurrection against America, sort of domestic terrorism. And I think for my part, I'm not sure if Mark shares this view or not, but from my part, it tells me the danger of narratives. Because actually, It's much more complicated than that. We went in with individuals, some of whom weren't really a danger. They were suffering what I've called kind of a delusional crisis. You know, I went in with a guy called Robert Gieswein, who was a guy from Colorado who genuinely believed that he was going in to liberate sex traffickers who were in the basement of the Capitol. Jacob Chansley went across with Mark across them. He's known as the QAnon shaman who was deep into a mental health crisis. Deeply troubled character. And so what I learned that day is actually, you know, narratives are easy to form, but actually there were 1,000 people in there that day, and 1,000 different reasons and motives were driving them forward. Some people were not violent, and in fact the people...
Lots of people cheerfully taking selfies,
right,
and excited to be in there.
I remember a guy behind me shouting, "Don't touch anything, this is a valuable space." You know, he was actually kind of doing, you know, he was just fascinated by and found it incredibly improbable that he was there in the Capitol. But obviously down below us in the crypt, you know, there were very bad actors who were intent on fighting the Capitol Hill police. So an incredibly complex, you know, sort of range of emotions and grievances. And it's taught me something, you know, after all these years doing television news, is the danger of narratives and of simplifications. It was an incredibly sort of complex range of grievances in that single mob.
Let me ask you a follow-up question to that, because you did walk in with this narrative. Of course, you have to be ready to tell a story, and things happen quickly, but you really weren't prepared, I think, for, how could you be, for what happened? And was there a certain moment you said, "Oh, this is an insurrection," and then did it change for you? Did that ever come to mind while you were there, or was that afterwards you got the whole picture?
Oh, I was just in full concentrating, getting everything unfolding. I don't think I realised the significance of it until I got to the office. And you said, first of all, that we were the only ones there. And then I started to see other television coverage of it. I think when you're looking down the viewfinder, you're not always taking the full overview. And so I was quite slow to get it. You were quick to get it.
Yeah, I mean, Mark has a different view. You know, he's looking through a viewfinder. So his view is, you know, profoundly influenced by the sort of visuals of the moment, and did a remarkable job capturing so much of that in sort of raw footage. I mean, for me, because I've done other insurrections in other countries, including in Africa and in Moscow. You know, I saw that there was a mob that was kind of feeding itself. So I realized that it was a direct challenge to the process of, you know, election certification. But, you know, whether I immediately categorized it as an insurrection, probably not. It was only, you know, you only realize this stuff, you know, in retrospect. At the time, you think, is this a, you know, I mean, how do we ever classify events like this in real time? You know, is it a riot? Is it an insurrection? Is it a, you know, a revolution? You know, you can only judge, you know, maybe it was a revolution at the time, you know, if other, you know, centers of power were being stormed at the same time, which we couldn't possibly have known. So I think it's only in retrospect you get that perspective. And I think, you know, in terms of real-time reporting, as we were trying to do there, you just have to stop and try to talk to people. And I was, you know, realizing even then that the rarity of the opportunity was being able to talk to people in real time as they were ransacking Congress. So it was about actually reverting to what journalism is all about, which is not judging, but listening. And that's you know, it sounds so basic, doesn't it? But how often in American journalism, or for all of us, do we just forget to listen to what people are saying? And so for me, when I was standing outside Nancy Pelosi's office, much to Mark's frustration, he wanted to get into the rotunda and to film the action. And I was thinking, no, I want to just talk to people. I mean, why are they here? What are they doing? And
but
Mark
those voices are what have stood the test of time, actually. I mean,
right.
Because they continue to shed light on what everyone was doing there.
Sure, but it's the sort of the sort of to and fro of a reporter and a videographer. You know, he wanted to get great pictures. I wanted to talk to people. So it was, you know, it was a good bit of teamwork. But we were both, you know, trying to do our own roles, and it was interesting tension in real time on January the 6th between us.
And I think, as you said earlier, I mean, I was measuring it as on the scale of civil disturbance. So I'm thinking, oh, this is a 4. It was afterwards I realised the political significance of it. Right. Yeah.
So I noticed also in the awards which you guys got, and you got so many awards, including the Emmy as well, But they mentioned, things which are about the journalism aspect of it, which we often don't hear too much about in the business school, but obviously it's a big part of what you're doing. And just carrying the camera, for example, right, and seeing it through a camera, is it something which you just do on a kind of a rote basis? You're going to go in and you have to push ahead on this whole thing, or at the same time, when you processing, Mark, this crazy thing going around you, and wondering, where's this going to go, and what's Robert going to do next, and how do I follow this guy, or how does that work as a team walking through this?
That's intuitive after all these years. I mean, he keeps an eye on where I am, I keep an eye on where he is, so that's pretty easy. And if I see somebody I think you should speak to, I'll mention it. If you see a shot that I should film, you'll tell me. So it's.
Yeah, I mean, I think about the great joy about television news over, writing or magazine journalism is, essentially television news still is a matter of teamwork. It's about collaboration between a reporter and a camera operator, and then when you're back in the bureau, between a reporter and an editor, a video editor. So it is, still an incredibly collaborative process, and that's what I think we enjoy the most about that. But one of the oddities of January the 6th for us is, even though we were the only kind of professional crew traveling in, sort of embedded in the mob, if you like, there were, as we all know, hundreds of people filming because they were all live streaming. So, it was exclusive in one sense, but all around us were people with phones, many of whom were going live stream on Facebook. Yeah. I mean, they were addressing their audiences. So this is the kind of the bizarre nature of January the 6th in the sort of modern era. Is I've done insurrections in, all over the world, but never have I been surrounded by people doing live blogging and sort of live streaming at the same time. I'm listening to this guy who's talking to some sort of audience out in Colorado about where he is, some guy here talking to New Jersey. Everybody's got their own little audience. And so we were the only professional crew, but in no way were we the only people filming this. I mean, there were, as we know, many people were broadcasting it to their own little niche audiences. Just we were the only kind of professional broadcasters. And I think, I think there is a role for professional broadcasters. We didn't have an agenda. I didn't follow any particular narrative, and Mark was filming, everything that he could from a visual standpoint. So. It's the value of a professional crew, but we have to recognize that, the distinguishing feature of January the 6th is just the sheer volume of video that's out there, including, of course, security camera pictures from the Capitol Hill Police.
So in about 5 minutes into this clipping you have here, I think you say insurrection for the first time in that. Maybe that was an hour into it, I don't know how long, but so it did then at some point you're willing to name it for what it became. And you've also alluded to something about the politics behind it, or were these things coming together in your mind in some ways? And what if you can articulate a bit more, what are these politics that you were talking about?
Right. I mean, I think, Mark and I had spent quite a lot of the months before working alongside sort of various militias and groups who were appalled in their view of what had happened on election day. They'd had this view that the election was stolen. So we were aware that there was this groundswell of opinion that the election had been stolen. All of it amplified on this, social media algorithms that were feeding the great conspiracy theory of the election. So we knew that was there. And I think even when I was on the steps of the Capitol about to enter, it was clear to me that in one way it was deeply shocking what happened. But as I pointed out in that little sort of stand-up, it wasn't surprising at all. That actually, I realized even before I got in there, that this was actually the logical conclusion of everything I'd been hearing for like a year, and certainly everything I'd heard since the election day itself. So I could, I recognized that it was both a shock and utterly unsurprising at the same time, one of the great paradoxes of January the 6th. And of course it throws it forward to what may happen in November of 2024, doesn't it? Because one of the big questions is, who now will accept the outcome of the next presidential election? And was what we filmed there just a foretaste of what may happen in 11 months' time?
Right. That's what McConnell had said that, I believe, in there, in that. So just to finish up this, when the rest of the clip goes through these statements by Biden and McConnell, who sounds reasonable. and then you have Trump ending the whole thing. And you put this together pretty quickly because you had to hit that 10 o'clock deadline, and it was 5 hours difference. So I don't know how you guys did it. You sat down and you clipped things out, and you left things in, and then it ran. Did you by then have a new narrative you were talking about, and it flows into this final moments of these politicians talking, which gives some sort of closure to what happened, or was it still?
Right. I mean, I think I was trying, and I still try to this day. Nearly 3 years on, to recognise that particularly because I'm a British reporter covering an American story. I'm not really in the kind of judging business. Mark is filming, I'm reporting, but what I'm really interested in is observing, and as I say, listening. So. It was clear to me quickly that this was an insurrection, but I've never sought to sort of mock or to judge those who went into the building. I mean, they speak for themselves, and many of them, authentically believed, and you might conclude that it's delusional, but they genuinely believed. Many of them, particularly the guys with us, that the election had been stolen. I mean, that's just a reality.
They were to right or wrong.
Right. So I've always sort of tried to understand that, and I've stayed in touch. I was talking about this a bit earlier. I've stayed in touch with some of those who are now in prison. Some of the people we went over the threshold with, and who are still behind bars serving time for that day. And I was speaking to one of them who was phoning me from a federal prison last week, and he said to me, does America realize that those who were imprisoned for January the 6th are, many of them are sentenced for 3, 4, 5 years. In other words, they're about to come out of prison. And he said to me, does America realize that our grievances haven't gone away? We've been radicalized in prison. We're even more angry now with the government than we were before. So this idea that sending them to prison has somehow solved the problem of January the 6th, in my view, and certainly from those I've spoken to who are behind bars, that isn't the case. That's why I think the next election is going to be perhaps a greater crisis for American democracy than January the 6th, 2021 was, because out of prison there can come, this cadre, this cohort of even more angry kind of insurrectionists, many of whom have been further radicalized in prison.
Well, Robert, thank you for.
I don't mean to depress anybody, but if journalism is meant to be some sort of an early warning system, then the feedback I'm getting from those who are behind bars is, that it could be very alarming what happens in November.
They're all expecting their pardons.
Right, and many of them are expecting to be pardoned once Trump is in office. Correct. Yeah.
So let's turn to the audience, take some questions, and then we'll may come back to more about what the implications are for us going forward. So, Bill, why don't you start out, and then I'll look at the hands behind you.
Were you able to just ask afterwards the American crews and your American colleagues, so to speak, why you were the only ones? What was their view of why you were the only ones?
Sure. I mean, I've had that conversation many times. Is the answer, because it's an embarrassment. I mean, I have many American journalistic friends and colleagues. Obviously, we mix with them a lot, and it's fair to say that they're embarrassed that a British crew was the only one who kind of went over the threshold with this mob. And the explanation they give, is that they were either alludes to my earlier point about news gathering. Either they were in studios. Some of the best reporters were locked into studios doing panels. Or they were, well, you laugh, but I mean, we turn on the TV and what do you see? You see 12 people talking, in little screens all up. I always shout at the television when I see that and say, why aren't they news gathering? Why aren't they reporting? I mean, what are they doing sitting in a studio in this epic echo chamber that is American cable TV news? I mean, what are they all doing? Why doesn't the editor tell them, get out and report? It is so exasperating to see the direction of travel of American cable TV news. And many of them agree. I mean, I was talking to some CNN reporters who were saying, we want to be unleashed, but we're kind of locked in and we're doing live shots and the producers want us to be live outside Capitol Hill on January the 6th. They were asking us for 10 minutes, every 10 minutes we must do a hit into the show. every 10 minutes. That means they've got no capability to roam around or to news gather. And so that is the problem, is partly the economics of it, there isn't the money to invest in news gathering. But it's also...
Were they there? I mean, were they physically?
Well, they were in pens, doing their live shots outside with the crowd, right? So they want, the crowd's moving down the ellipse, down the mall and into the...
They stayed in their little...
Exactly, they're staying in their pens because there's got a producer in their ear saying, coming to you, Jim, in 4 minutes. So what can they do?
Yes, and perhaps state your name and where you're from, so we...
I'm Chloe. I'm from the journalism school.
Right.
So as a journalist myself, I often find it hard to balance listening to people, but also not allowing these sort of like illusions to go on air unchecked. So how do you balance providing context while also not ignoring and just like not listening to people who are talking?
Right, so that's a good question, Chloe, isn't it? So if somebody's kind of a conspiracy theorist, do we, and they want to address our camera, they're talking to Mark, and they want to say, we're trying to liberate sort of sex traffickers or kids who are being trafficked down in the cellars of the Capitol, which is what some of them thought, which is kind of an extension of the Pizzagate conspiracy theory, that there was some sort of people trafficking with kids in basements around Washington, D.C. Do we interview them or do we say, look, we can't put them on air because they've got this delusional view? I mean, my view on that day was that, let the viewer judge, essentially. I mean, we have to provide a kind of broader context of reporting around the election, about the growth of conspiracy theories, but that was a moment where I think we just have to say, look, the viewer can kind of interpret this themselves. If somebody's making a completely outlandish conspiratorial view, then put them on air and let the viewer decide that for themselves. And sure, we need to do a broader contextual work on that by exploring conspiracy theories, why they're so embedded in American politics in a way that they're not in Europe. Why do so many people believe these kind of outlandish views about stolen elections or sex trafficked kids? But on that occasion, when everything is so raw, it struck me that the right way to do was just to talk to people and to listen, and then viewers would make their own mind up. What do you think, Chloe? How would you do that?
I almost wonder that. I think that makes me just wonder about the general arc of like American journalism into not trusting our viewers as much as we should be. So that's what it makes me think.
Right. So let's pick up a question over here, and then we'll swing over here, okay?
Hi, I'm also from the journalism school. Given what happened and what you're sort of predicting might happen, do you think it's have to expand the definition of a conflict zone to include Washington?
So let's make sure to speak loud when you ask these questions. We have mics around, but still it's good to speak up. Okay?
Well, the question being whether we should sort of extend the concept of a conflict zone to include Washington.
Would it mean extra pay, do you think? Would that be one of the factors?
Yeah, that's Mark. So do we get danger money? Right.
Yeah, yes, absolutely.
Yeah, that's a good theory. I mean, but it comes down to sort of narratives again, in a way. I mean, what is a conflict? I mean, in a way, every country is a conflict zone, right? I mean, we're all in conflict. I mean, we only have to see this about how Gaza and the Palestinian Israeli crisis is playing out now to realize that, that is a conflict zone over there, but it's a conflict zone in every Western society as we try and make sense of a humanitarian catastrophe on that scale. So I'm not personally, what January the 6th taught me is conflict can come anywhere. There we were assuming that the United States was a sort of mature democracy where the institutions were safe and it was just a matter of a competitive election. Maybe a close election, maybe a contested election, but nevertheless a peaceful transition of power. But if January the 6th can happen here, what it really told the world was it can happen anywhere, right? So I think we can get hung up on definitions of what is a conflict zone. I think there are days with my daughters, my house is a conflict zone, right? So, I mean, everything is a conflict zone. It's all a matter of perspective, and I'm not too worried about definitions. I think, our job is to be ready to report not just conflict, but, tensions or peacemaking or how conflict is overcome, and that can come from any direction at any time in any country, however mature the sort of democratic systems might seem to be.
Take a question here and state your name and who's from.
Andy Marks, I'm a professor at the medical school. Got lost. Based on your interviews and what you saw on that day, is it your impression that Trump was responsible for this, and do you think the U.S. legal system will hold him accountable?
That's an excellent question. Not surprising, yeah. You come from the medical school to ask me a tough one like that. My judgment is there's a degree of responsibility, but there's a degree of responsibility in many different directions too. We've talked about how I think journalism has failed America at this moment. We've talked about how, we haven't talked about, but we could talk about how, how did we know that January the 6th was brewing, but the Capitol Hill Police and the FBI apparently were kind of missing in action that day. The January the 6th committee didn't want to go in that direction because they wanted to exclusively look at the kind of political ramifications of January the 6th and to point the finger at Donald Trump, rightly or wrongly, depending on your perspective. But I think there are many different factors that went into it. Obviously Donald Trump's speech on the ellipse at 12:15, 2 hours prior was one factor when he talked about marching on the Capitol. So I think it's a factor, but have I got confidence in the legal system? I think that's a question we're going to find out over the next 9 months. But less interesting than whether I have confidence in it, it's abundantly clear to me that tens of millions of Americans regarded as these trials as he would put it, as the weaponization of the judicial system. So I'm alarmed that whatever the outcome in the courts, tens of millions of Americans are not going to buy into the outcome or to the sentences that they may decide to issue against Donald Trump.
Yes, please. Then back there, and then.
David Little, business school. Prior military experience to contextualize my question. So obviously, you use the word insurrection. There were casualties on both sides, and you have likely shed light on the idea of escalation or a repeat at the very least. There are martyrs now, and there may soon be outcries of weaponization of the judicial system. Based on your prior experiences around the world where things cool down and heat up again, cool down and heat up again in various locations we've seen some sort of civil unrest, do you have any thoughts on how this might go, right? We have considerable resources to suppress civilian uprising, but I don't know that would go well. I'm curious.
You have a thought, Mark, on that?
Yeah, I think it's going to be hard to contain the people you've talked about when they come out. They're going to want to organise. And it was interesting, we were talking today about the Proud Boys. Where are they? They seem to have dissipated, but who's to say they might not organise or regroup in some form? There's still militias out there.
Right, I think that's true. I think one of the consequences of the sprawling FBI investigation into January the 6th was, they recognised that right-wing political violence is a real threat, but the consequence of it was that the militias went underground. Many of them are out there. I've tracked some of them in some documentaries I've done. They haven't disappeared, they've simply dispersed, and actually, paradoxically, made it even harder to track them. The 3%ers are an example, but there are other militia groups which the FBI is struggling to identify and to track. So I think there is a risk of escalation. I think there's a risk of elections struggling to have sort of legitimacy now. That's the problem. That's what happened on January the 6th, wasn't it? The tens of millions of people sort of believed the election had been stolen. And it seems to be unlikely that there's going to be a journey now that in November 2024, suddenly there's renewed faith in the election process. I don't think that'll happen. I think it's the danger of the sort of mainstream sort of pro-Trump view that elections are not fair, combined with this sort of fringe element of militias that poses the greatest danger, whether they combine in some way that creates what you're talking about, which is a genuine sort of threat of sustained political violence.
Let me ask you a question. I know we have a few hands back here, and I'll come back in real quickly on it. But unfortunately, the question maybe you want to postpone the answering this. But so we clearly you know, the U.S. is scaring the hell out of a lot of people, right? And we would like to think that, and we know that there's problems which are of a long-term nature and is likely to generate problems in this near future called the elections. But do you think that media, when you assess media as you've been doing, do you think that there's been an impact which gives some hope that there is ways to influence these things? I know you're modest on these issues, but media does play a role, for better or for worse. It's been much analyzed and studied. What's your view on that?
Well, I think I'm interested in Mark's view on that, but I mean, the danger is that it's being overtaken by, social media outrage, right? I mean, we're seeing this classically in the Gaza conflict, whereas, it's for sort of mainstream TV networks to get into Gaza is almost impossible now. So how are we consuming our news on the tragedy of Gaza? And the answer is we're getting it in sort of bite-sized portions from sometimes incredibly brave Palestinian cameramen within the Gaza Strip, but also just from raw kind of unfiltered social media postings. So I think, we were lucky in the sense on January the 6th because at least there was one professional crew and Mark's incredible camera work on the day that could give us some context. But what I'm noticing, and it's an interesting comparison, is in the Gaza Strip, which is the epic conflict of our time, unbelievably polarizing and traumatizing even. Where are we getting our news from in this conflict? We're getting it not from sort of professional broadcasters who are not even, unfortunately we can't get into the Gaza city, we can't get into Rafah or Khan Yunis. We're having to rely on these social media postings, and that's where people are getting it. So we're getting news from that conflict really without context, and I think that's part of the challenge for us. The IDF is doing a few embeds, but that's inadequate and maybe even isn't worth doing. So we have a major conflict going on of epic proportions where we have no professional crews in there at all, other than maybe a team, and I don't mean to belittle them because they're doing a great job, but Al Jazeera obviously have a local Palestinian team they've relocated down to Khan Yunis now, but so there's one sort of crew there, but Al Jazeera has, they're using Palestinian freelancers and staff there, not Western reporters. So it's a conflict where there is no kind of professional ability to provide context from within the conflict zone itself.
And meanwhile, most people under 30 are now getting their news from TikTok. So, and you marry that with the whole AI thing, which is the other side of your project, and you wonder what we're actually looking at on social media. How genuine is it, whether it's
deep fakes,
fiction or otherwise? Yeah.
Right. What's your view on that? Do you feel like in a conflict like Gaza, we can't get when we can't get professional crews into the conflict zone, that we're in a world of pain and trouble and giving anything context?
Well, we know. I mean, look, we have lots of studies done here and elsewhere which are looking at deep fakes, and we know that it's a serious problem in distorting the news. But what's kind of even more, I wouldn't say depressing, but troubling is what you just said. That, of course, there's limitations in the warfare, and that's been going back for the U.S. now. Embeddedness, you're embedded in what you get to see and you don't get to see. But the fact that the media itself plays a role, and it has lots of different politics and lots of different economic interests as well. And I'm kind of curious, maybe discuss at some point here, but not much time remains. I want to catch these folks to my left. But overall, what's your evaluation of media and as an agent which is making the world a little bit better? And you may not say that's not my job, but it's someone's job in the media. When you have a camera, you're a powerful man for that second. Or do you think it's going to be some things we have to worry about?
Well, I think, this is why, what you're teaching here and what you guys are doing is so important, is because there is an absolute imperative to give conflicts like Gaza or, on January the 6th, conflicts like what happened, the storming of the Capitol. We need to give context.
But I want to talk about the Capitol. Did the Capitol, for example, have an impact upon the British public? Did Because suddenly these things came across that night.
Right.
What was the impact upon them?
Well, I think as we've discussed, I mean, this powerful thought coursed through European opinion that if it could happen in America, in Washington, you know, which was just taken for granted that there'll be a peaceful transfer of power. It was just a given. If it can happen there, it can happen anywhere. And now we see, you know, not just in Europe, but in South America too, the sort of march of right-wing populism. It raises, you know, really profound questions about the direction of our politics. And it is, in some ways, makes it even more important to have, press and television cameras, you know, inside the room, inside the conflict or inside the political debate, because you know, we can provide some context and we can provide access for people, but it's a huge challenge not to be overtaken by, you know, the outrage machine that are the algorithms on social media.
Let me take a few questions. I'll look to Kevin here to make sure we're ending in reasonable time. So yes, go ahead.
Ethan from the business school. You guys both talked about at what moment kind of the significance of the day kind of clicked a bit. I'm curious though, for the insurrectionists, in your experience, like, do you think that they really, in the moment, understood the gravity of the situation and what had occurred as they advanced up the steps and into the building and into Pelosi's office and whatnot? Or was it just more of a natural snowballing of a herd mentality that was kind of following, and not till afterward in the coverage did they really understand?
It's a good question, that, Ethan. I mean, you know, there's 1,000 people there. We were with a group of like 20 who we went in up the steps, through the corridors, down to the crypt, up to Nancy Pelosi's office where they ransacked that, went into the rotunda. The impression I got, I'd be interested in Mark's view, is that they had no sense of the gravity. If I'd said to one of them, do you know you're going to go to prison for 10 years for this? I mean, they would have been absolutely taken aback. They thought, you know, and you heard their chant, you know, this is our house, this is our house. I mean, rightly or wrongly, delusionally or not, you can have your view on that. They thought that, at least the small cohort we were with, had no sense that they were, I mean, they may have realized they were breaking the law, but they had no sense they were participating in a major assault on American democracy. They just didn't think that, in my view. What do you think?
They thought they had right on their side, and well, as they kept repeating, this is our house. They thought, we've a right to be here to fix this because you're doing something wrong and we're going to fix it.
It's difficult. I mean, as a foreigner, we realize whenever we walk around the Capitol building, you know, what is uniquely wonderful about the building and the complex, if you like, is how everybody sort of thinks it's their real estate. You know, they feel a sense of ownership of it. You would never have the Palace of Westminster, you know, stormed like that, because everyone's too scared. You know, this is Parliament in Britain. Nobody wanders in off the streets into the House of Commons. That doesn't happen, but people do, and it's a wonderful American tradition. People do literally wander off the streets and knock on the door of their congressman or senator or congresswoman, and so that is a feature of that. And when they entered the Capitol, in my experience, certainly the guys I was with, they were either delusional about what they were trying to sort of be there for, or they had this kind of very sort of territorial sense that, well, it's our house. I mean, why wouldn't we be in here? If we're outraged by an election outcome, why wouldn't we be here? So I think the answer to your good question is I don't think they did have a sense. I mean, perhaps a few did who were battling downstairs, but the people we wouldn't have recognized the idea that they were insurrectionists. They just wouldn't have recognized that.
Yes.
I'm Jessica. I'm in Columbia College, and actually my high school science teacher's nephew was there. Jacob Lang was arrested.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Is he in prison or is he?
I think he's in prison.
Yeah.
That's sort of hope. But actually, that's sort of my question is, knowing now that prison, the conditions there seem to radicalize some of these people, is there a better alternative for dealing with someone leading a mob as absurd as this?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question, isn't it? It sort of plays to everybody's sort of individual sense of social justice, you know, and indeed the purpose of prison. You know, is it you know, is it meant to reform or is it meant to punish? So these are fundamental sort of questions of social justice. I mean, in my view, I think America's got it wrong. I think we put behind bars a whole ton of people who needed help. There were definitely some bad actors. Those who had assaulted the police should, you know, no doubt be punished and face the consequences. But I know probably at least 10 people who are behind bars now who essentially are conspiracy theorists and who believe deeply that something terrible had happened in America, and they'd gone down this rabbit hole of conspiracy theories. I mean, a classic example is a guy I met in Florida from Coral Springs who went in there, filmed it all himself, had a deep sense that he was actually, doing a great deed. He was, certainly suffers from autism and maybe some other mental health crises as well. He was sentenced to prison, and the value of him being in prison strikes me as none at all. I think for some people there needed to be a kind of a sort of a reckoning with their conspiratorial mindset. They needed mental health intervention. And I think putting them in prison...
Deprogramming. Maybe they should
right.
have deprogramming.
Deprogramming, right.
Yeah,
I mean, something like that.
But
yeah.
seriously, like when you're in a cult, radicalization in prison is a known thing. The Maze prison in the 70s in Northern Ireland created the modern provisional IRA. I mean, that's just one example. That every conflict has, it's recognised, but it doesn't seem to be recognised here.
No, I mean, it's a controversial sort of thought of ours in a way, because the main narrative that came out of the Jan 6 committee is, look, this is treason. These are traitors. These are domestic terrorists. They must be punished. We need to set an example. But I mean, all we can say is from our perspective, from the people we went in there, they were clearly unwell. I mean, they had multiple mental health crises. I mean, Jacob Chansley is a perfect example of that, the QAnon shaman. He spent 4 years in prison in Arizona. He lives in Phoenix. I've been to his house. I've talked to his mother. I've investigated his story. I mean, he's a sad individual whose father committed suicide. He's got trauma. He's bullied, assaulted, sexually abused when he was a kid. I mean, he's a complicated guy. And yet he wrote that sort of poisonous note to Dick Cheney where he wrote "Justice is coming" or whatever the phrase he used was. So he needed to accept some responsibility. But was it valuable him being put behind bars? But
at the same time, the Proud Boys were there. Like, there were people who were already radical, and so. That's the bigger question. What do you do? How do you solve that in a society? How do you deprogram those people?
Yeah, it's a good question, isn't it? I mean, the answer is, putting 1,000 behind bars probably wasn't a successful tactic, isn't a successful tactic, but maybe, there were bad actors and people who needed to go through the courts. As always, it's kind of depends on your view of the role of prison and punishment in a society. So this thing about January the 6th, it raises so many questions about journalism, about politics, about social justice, about conspiracy theories, about social media.
Right.
So many questions.
Well, it sounds like you guys are going to be busy.
Right.
Unfortunately, you're going to be busy, or fortunately, and have you guys doing this. What we do know is that from lots of studies over time is that politics gets kind of interesting when it gets organized. And I think that's something probably, because it doesn't sound like these guys are very organized last time. But, it's not clear what's going to happen in the upcoming election. And part of the prison experience is not just being radicalized, it's also being organized coming out of the prisons. So I don't know if we fully faced that yet and what it's going to look like. But, it's not just about a few people. It's like a lot of people are really engaged in these elections. So one has to step back and figure out really what is the story here. And we can spend a little time, which we should do at some point, thinking about, is the U.S., I was going to ask you, what's your ranking of insurrections on this, and what's going to be the big one? And this doesn't necessarily have to be the U.S. It can, in Europe, it could be some small country which gets the whole thing, going. So it's a good time to have, some vigilance. Both in the terms of the work we do here, but also on the side of what the work you're doing.
Yeah, I mean, I would just echo that. I mean, I think, even though we're kind of journalists on the front lines, we also, value the kind of academic work and the intellectual framework that needs to be created. I mean, how do we navigate the next insurrection? What am I going to say on the steps on, whatever it is, January the 6th, 2025? I mean, is it right to call it an insurrection? How quickly do we judge it? Should we call it out straight away? All of this is stuff that I know you talk about with your students, and it's valuable. There should be a feedback between those of us who are working on the front line and those who are studying it from a more theoretical and intellectual framework.
Right. And also engaged too. You may have heard, this is a very engaged campus.
Right. Right.
Thank you so much for coming, Mark and Robert. Really great.